Good evening. Not sure where Dr. Rothschild is. I know she's coming tonight. She might be running a little late. So, Eileen, I'm going to turn it over to you. If maybe you could introduce everyone that you have here with you tonight. I know we've met most of you before.
Absolutely, it's my pleasure. And thank you, Council, for inviting us here this evening. It's our pleasure to come and talk about the American Rescue Plan and where we are. So we have our team here tonight. Christopher Hughes, who's doing our communications for ARPA in the city, and Erica Yurkovic, who's the project manager for the city of Scranton. From ANSER Advisor, we have Desi Navarro and Joseph Sheets. So Desi will be leading our presentation this evening.
Okay, thank you. Appreciate you coming tonight. Give us an update. There's Dr. Rothschild. The floor is yours, Desi. Thanks.
All right. Test. There we go. Good evening. Excited to be here. It's been a while since we saw you last, so excited to give an overall progress update, as Eileen said, on the ARPA plan and program. So Joseph Sheets is with me here today as well, our senior project manager, and we're going to go ahead and jump right into it. So we're going to talk to you all about overall progress. We'll start first with an objective statement, and then we'll go through the allocation plan, kind of a review of what you guys saw last April. Nothing has really changed materially in that plan, so everything you saw in April in terms of direction forward has been the direction. Then we'll give you an update on progress against that plan that you saw in April. And then Joseph's going to talk to us a little bit about some final rule changes that are expected to be coming out here very soon. We'll go through a revenue loss update with Joseph as well, and then he'll show you our dashboard tool. I think you guys have probably all seen it at this point. It is on the city website, but we'll throw it up on the screen so you can see what that looks like, and then we'll end with questions. So the objective tonight, really two parts. The first is to provide an overview of the city's progress in implementing its ARPA spending plan that you saw last April. And then the second point is to provide an overview of the pending final rule update by Treasury. In addition to that, there's the subset of the revenue loss update that we'll go through as well. So this pie chart and the information on the screen and what's in front of you in your printouts shouldn't look new to you all. That is the plan, the spending plan that you saw last April. And as I mentioned, those categories and those dollar amounts within each of those major categories is still the plan as it currently exists and still the marching orders moving forward. So that breakdown is the breakdown. That is your total $68.7 million broken down into the various expenditure categories as published by Treasury. What you'll see here as far as the allocation plan review of the notices of funding availability is about $14.2 million of that 68, which are really intended to be those community programs, that kind of those outward facing dollars that different organizations, small businesses, individuals can really seek benefits of this funding and kind of have those real tangible benefits as they apply for different programs and different funding here. So they're broken down into public health and education, the housing bucket, and the economic recovery bucket at those amounts that you see there in that pie chart. Again, same thing that we saw last April. And this is where we're going to give you a lot of information about each of these programs and kind of where they've been, number of applications, number of awards, some of that high-level data, so you can see how that funding is now getting out into your community and really starting to, I think, make a difference here. But first, we're going to start with a quick overview of the infrastructure and capital projects that are included in the plan. So a couple of highlights here, working our way from top down. So the Meadowbrook Culvert project is now complete. The electric vehicles and charging station project and program, that is in progress. HVAC improvements in various public buildings, including the fire station. It also includes the emergency building as well. Those are in progress. The city paving project is complete. The park improvement projects, which there are a handful, Robinson Park, Oakmont Park, Capouse, a few others, the Scranton Mini Park, those are all currently in procurement. The City Hall roof and north tower repair projects, that is also in procurement. The city IT and office repairs as well. The East Mountain Stormwater Drainage Project, that's a very large project or program that's currently in design at this point. There's been a lot of, I think, neighborhood meetings with the designers and the consultants to make sure everybody's bought in and understands the direction there. So that's moving forward very well at this point. Same with Kaiser Valley, Kaiser Valley stormwater projects in that program, and the streetscape projects as well. Those are all currently in design. And then the connectivity plan, there's about 3.2 allocated to that program. That's currently in the planning programming stage with the assistance of a consultant that we've brought on as well, so getting good traction there. So that's the kind of infrastructure capital project status update for the major highlights. And then we'll jump into, excuse me, the progress to date on some of those community grant programs and some of that outward-facing dollars that we had talked about, included in that $14.2 million. So you'll see here there are a lot of different programs, grant programs that are in various stages of implementation at this point. The first being the nonprofit recovery grants. That was actually issued by, or was issued as a subrecipient award to Scranton Area Foundation, Community Foundation, who ran that program on behalf of the city and with the city's help. That is closed. They were able to allocate all their dollars there. I'm actually jumping ahead and giving you the highlights of the slide we're going to see next, so I'm just going to keep running through this. The public health grants, that has also been opened and closed at this point, and the awards have been made. So different entities within the community now have their funding to now start issuing and overseeing some of these programs to now serve community members in terms of behavioral health, mental health, substance abuse, violence prevention, so a great program there. Child Care Education Assistant Grant Program. That is currently just closed. This is a recent closure, and awards are pending. So we're finishing up the eligibility review process with those folks for the different applications. City's going through a scoring process, and then awards will be made here shortly. Small Business Recovery and Wage Boost Program, that is also closed with awards pending. The Small Business Startup and Expansion Grant Program, that's going to continue to remain open until the end of this year, but the city's gotten some great applications there, and that program, I think, is probably one of the more exciting ones, just those small business owners in those QCT areas that have the potential to really impact the economics of those areas, and giving them the ability to start up a small business has just been a really cool thing to see. The Homeowner Home Buyer Grant Program, that is also currently open. That'll remain open till the end of the year, in addition to the Home Rehab and Weatherization Grant Program. So jumping into some stats here on each one of those. So the Nonprofit Recovery Grant Program, as I mentioned, that was issued as a subrecipient award to the Scranton Area Community Foundation. They ran that program very well. It was a privilege working with that group of folks. It opened last July and closed mid-August of last year. With SAF's help and the help of these fabulous individuals here from the city side, we ran 2 technical help sessions to kind of help applicants understand, and these nonprofits understand how to apply and what that application actually looks like and how it would be reviewed. I think they found them very beneficial, and ultimately we ended up receiving about 72 different applications for a total request of about $3.6 million, so the need is there in the community. The city was able to award 48 of those for a total amount of $1 million, which was in that spending plan. That was the target spending amount that was published last April. So great program, and those nonprofits now have the money, and they're able to use that to get them on their way towards economic recovery. The next one here.
Excuse me.
Questions, please. Yes.
When I take a look at this old, I guess the old breakdown.
Yeah.
So the Scranton Area Community Foundation nonprofit grant, it has it listed at about $1 million, and you said it's about 3.6 that went out. So could you just explain that one a little bit?
Yeah, no, it's clarity. So we received about 3.6 million of applications. That was the amount of applications. Yeah, and the award amount is the 1 million at the allocation.
All right, thank you.
Good question. Public health grants. So that application period opened last fall, August 22nd. It went through September 16th. Similar to the nonprofit grant program, we ran a technical help session for these individuals. We received about 25 applications for a total requested amount of about $1.5 million. We were able to award, the city was able to award 23 of the 25 applications to the total award amount of about $950,000. Question?
Yeah, so there were 25 applicants and 23 awarded. Is it fair to say that the two that were not awarded didn't qualify or didn't?
Yep. So there's an eligibility review.
It's kind of like there's 24 awards and you know, we're giving 23 out and one gets left and goes home crying. So I'm just wondering why those other two were left out.
Yeah, so there's an eligibility review process that everybody goes through. We lead the effort on doing that, and we do that based off of Treasury's guidance that they require in their final rule for saying, you know, is this an eligible use for this entity? And so as part of that eligibility review process, in all of these grant programs, unfortunately, there are a couple that end up falling off.
Okay, thank you.
Yep.
So that review process is conducted by ANSER.
It's another great question. So there's a combination. Any subrecipient grant program or subrecipient award where that entity like SAF or Scranton Area Community Foundation is carrying out a program on behalf of the city, they share in the responsibility of doing an eligibility review of those applicants as well. But we also assist in that. When it's directly from the city to a beneficiary, a great example would be the small business startup and expansion grants. There's no subrecipient there. Those agreements go directly between the city and that small business that then is eligible. We perform the eligibility review process across the board for that.
But with those grants, the city scores them.
Correct. Thank you.
So they would do the ARPA eligibility, and we score them based on a scoring rubric that's established for each grant.
Good question. So that's the public health grant. The next one was the Small Business Recovery and Wage Boost Grant Program. So this went out in two different award rounds. It was done by SAF as a subrecipient. The first award round closed November 14th. Really, the idea behind that was to try and get, you know, those folks that needed money the most, and were kind of on that cusp, you know, some funding before the year's end. And then there was the second round that opened up right after the first round closed, and it remained open until January 31st. We ran one technical help session for those folks as well. Total number of applications received was 24. Total amount requested was about 1.69 million. So far, and this is a rolling program, and these eligibility and scoring reviews are done on a rolling basis, right, as the applications come in. I'm sorry, I'm jumping ahead here a little bit. So the total amount requested was the 1.69 million. The number of applications awarded to date has been 3. We are in the process of finishing up the eligibility review phase with SAF. And so far of those 3, the total amount that's been awarded there is $125K. So there's still a lot left to award here, but still going through the eligibility review process with SAF.
So same question as before. So you have 1.69 million here is total. Oh, never mind, the amount requested. But we have about 3 million that's going to go into this area, correct?
Correct.
Okay. When we're looking at small business, so this one here, you have your small business recovery, wage boost, and then earlier you talked about the small business startups. About how much money are you putting into startup businesses as compared to like established businesses?
Go ahead.
Startup is 1.2 million. Established businesses is 3 million.
Yeah, and I noticed that the small business startup / expansion grants, so those are smaller businesses that are then deciding to add additional services or whatever.
Right, it could be either one. It could be a brand-new business starting in the city, or it could be a business that's here and they're going to expand their footprint, or they're going to go into a different line of product, so they're going to grow in the city.
Right, like for instance, somebody might have like a dine-in only restaurant, but then they want to do a takeout business through
The
something.
downtown deli's a good example. They had their business there, and then they moved in and they opened the coffee shop, and they're doing catering and that sort of thing. So that's an example of an expansion.
Gotcha, all right, thanks.
About how many brand-new businesses are we seeing?
How many brand new, do you know the number of the?
It's a minimum of 5, Councilman. In fact, the last round that we did in March, all of those businesses were startup businesses.
Right, but
right
overall
off the
in the
ground.
city, in 2022, I think there were 54 new businesses. We didn't necessarily fund them all, and we also have other programs. We have the micro grant and the business loan to grant, so they're actually in play too. So businesses have a lot of opportunity.
I'm sorry, what was that number for 2022 of new businesses?
54.
54? Okay, thanks.
Now, when it comes to a new business, I mean, you have to get over the hump, right? So you start a new business. What's the threshold for a business to say, be successful for at least another decade or be successful moving forward? Do you know what that is? And I'm just looking in terms of where should we be going? Should we be looking to fund money into established businesses to, you know, make up the base of this city? Or should we be looking to, I guess where I'm going is, if we're giving new businesses money, is this money going to be used for 6 months and then the business goes under, or it's going to be used for a year, the business goes under, and then this money is better utilized elsewhere? Or are we finding, I mean, what kind of data do you have
Well,
on
the
that?
business recovery, we have $3 million in that
Correct.
pot. So we're actually looking at it from every angle.
Mm-hmm.
Right, so there's opportunities, no matter where you are with your business here in the city, there is an opportunity for you.
Yeah, is there any data that I see you're starting, it looks like you want to answer it.
I think the important thing to recognize is anytime any entity invests in a small business, there's going to be risk involved. I think there's a certain level of calculated risk that the city has made by saying, you know, we're investing 25% of a project cost or a startup cost into a startup business or expanding business with the program. So it is larger than I think more municipalities would be willing to foot, but we know the struggles of small business both pre and post-pandemic. What's exciting is the amount of new businesses that are coming to the table. We're specifically seeing a lot of tech startups, organizations that are benefiting from being in the downtown, in the enterprise center, but are willing to build tech startups here in the city, at which we know there's tremendous growth opportunity in the tech industry across the board. I don't have a number for you as to what is a good number to fund or what is a bad number. I think it's important to also realize we capped startup and expansion grants at $100,000 to make sure we can impact as broad a base in the business community as possible. But I don't have a finite number as to say, like, this is the amount of money a business needs to be able to succeed through year 1 or through year 5.
You know, what we will have, if you recall, we did hire the Institute to do programmatic auditing. It's too early to do to do the auditing at this point, but they have a program called InPlane, and in my previous role when we used it, DCED used to use that, and what they could do is they could tell the amount of economic impact per our investment in the city. So it's going to take a little bit for that to be realized and be able to put those data through, but we should have some really good data based on the investment in the future.
I have a quick question. So when all this money is awarded,
All right, it's a quick question. So I see that some of the grants are closed, but not awarded yet. So when all this money is awarded, and say there's a couple companies that, because, sometimes grants have to be paid back if they don't follow the criteria. So what happens, who's going to police that? When all this money is distributed, who's going to follow up and say, we gave Joey's beach shop $6 million, and, well, he's gone. So
Yep.
What's that process going to look like?
Good question. So it looks two different ways depending on the type of grant program it is. So a grant program run by a subrecipient, like the SAF subrecipient programs, there's a subrecipient monitoring plan that the city has that goes along with the internal control policy that's developed specifically for these funds. And that subrecipient monitoring policy or that plan actually requires frequent check-ins with that subrecipient to go through a list of questions that asks them things about risk from their organization. Has there been any changes in their organization? It asks them some financial questions. Then it also asks them for a status update on performance in getting funding out the door as a subrecipient and into the beneficiary's hands, or providing that service that the beneficiaries ultimately benefit from. So that's the one side of it. The second side is for the small business startup expansion grants. This is a beneficiary agreement between the city and these small businesses. It's done on a reimbursement basis first. Well, I guess even before that. When they're putting their application together, they're required to put a very detailed budget and a business plan in front of the city as well that gets reviewed, right? So there's that part of the process. And then every quarter, they actually submit under the MOU or the Memorandum of Understanding with the city a reimbursement request for these are the dollars for this period that I'm asking for against this grant. So So there's a check-in with them at that point as well to look and see, here's your budget, here's what you thought you were going to spend over the course of 2 years, right? And this is now what your reimbursement request is for Q1. Does it look like it's on track, right? And does everything look like it's falling into place? Or do we miss a reimbursement request? Do we get a reimbursement request that looks suspect? And those are the indicators that, we can dive into and ask them a little more questions about it. And you're right, there is ultimately in every MOU, right, with the city or a beneficiary or subrecipient agreement, there are clauses for being able to terminate that agreement if the performance isn't up to standard.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome. Okay. Any other questions on the wage boost or recovery?
Just real quick, so there's only 3 applicants to date. So this isn't closed, obviously. So what happens if you don't get any more applicants? And how long is that process? So is it after the end of 3 years and there's money left, and then where does that money go?
So just a quick correction there. There's 24 applications that are currently in. 3 have been awarded at this point. So there's 24 currently. The total ask is the 1.7. So if all 24 go through the eligibility
That'll
review
leave that
process,
money.
right, then we've got 1.7 against the 3 million. But in terms of then your question of what do we do within the remaining 1.3, it's really the city's discretion if they would like to run another round, right? You guys have time to do another round of small business recovery if you'd like to do that. You could also reallocate it to a different project or program within your spending plan if you'd like to do that as well. Good questions. So you guys kind of stole the thunder a little bit on the small business startup and expansion grant, but we'll go through kind of the high level of that. That grant's going to continue to remain open until October 31st, again on a rolling basis. We've ran 1 technical health session for that for applicants. So far, 17 applications have been received to date for a total of about $770K. 10 have been awarded at the $650,000 mark. Home rehab and weatherization. So this is a subrecipient grant program that's being run by both NeighborWorks and ACE. So the difference there is that NeighborWorks, they've got a aging in place program that's got a lot of traction. It's doing a lot of good for the older folks in the community. So they're really focusing the rehab on that group of beneficiaries, where ACE is, any demographic really. That grant program is going to continue to remain open through the end of this year as well, December 31st. There's been 1 technical help session that was administered online for this. So far, this one's very popular. 57 applications have been received to date. There is a process, right? There's a lot of checks that NeighborWorks and ACE have to go through in terms of getting inspectors set up. They've got to get procurement done, get contractors lined up, and it's kind of busy season right now. So when you see the amount requested at only $70K, it's for all of those reasons. As soon as the momentum picks up, that number is going to continue to grow very quickly here.
Are there income eligibilities for that?
Yes, there are. So the eligibility requirements for the home rehab and the weatherization program are you've got to either be an impacted or disproportionately impacted entity within the city based off of the low or moderate income requirements that Treasury published. And so to that end, NeighborWorks and ACE, when we talked about the split eligibility review that we work with subrecipients on, they're going through an income verification process on their end as applicants come in to make sure that they meet those income requirements, in addition to a handful of other things. So the total funding that'll be made available ultimately for that program, or what's slated at this point, is the $800K in the spending plan. The next program here is the homeowner home buyer program. This is on the newer end. So the rollout here is going to continue to remain open until December 31st of the end of this year. This is being done as a subrecipient agreement with NeighborWorks, with 1 technical help session complete already and $350,000 in this program or in this project budget. NeighborWorks they've got kind of a list of the folks that are interested at this point, but they're working through the application process currently, and as we speak. So at this point, no major updates for this quarter, but my suspicion is next quarter we'll see some tremendous numbers in this program, because it's going to be pretty popular.
So this money money would be like to help with the down payment or supplement a down payment?
That's
Is that what
that's
it's
exactly,
designed for?
yep, that's exactly right.
Now, is the 350, is that the total? I know you have it as total here.
Yes.
On my other sheet that I have about 500,000. Is that,
And Councilman, don't forget, we do have CDB, or the home dollars from HUD are also in play. The rules are a teeny bit different, but they have the two pots of money to use, so I think that'll expand the amount of people be able to use the home buyer program significantly.
so with that being said, the 500,000 that I'm seeing on this spending plan, is that, there's other monies involved with that amount?
Oh, so you had received along the way a budget transfer, so the home buyer and the home rehab programs, in order to make that funding work, and plus since we had CDBG dollars for that, we transferred some of the home buyer money into the home rehab and the home weatherization to make it work for ACE and NeighborWorks.
Gotcha, okay. So at this point in time, the home buyer program is going to be total 350,000.
Plus the CDBG part, too, is in play.
Will come into the home buyer?
It has to run separate because the rules are slightly different, but it does, people are able to take advantage of it in the city.
And then some of that money was put over to the home rehab, home weatherization to make that a total of 800,000.
Right, we felt the need would be higher in that pot.
Okay. And just to go back to that small business startup, you had the total amount awarded was 650,000 and the total amount available was 650,000. So that is, even though it's opened, we've utilized all of that money?
I think that's a typo.
That's a
That's
clerical
typo.
error. So the total amount available for that program to start was $1.25 million.
It's a bad copy paste there. Okay, childcare and education assistance. So this is the last one to update you all on. So that program opened January 24th, closed March 7th. One technical help session was conducted for that. Total of 17 different applications were received. A total amount requested at this point is a little over $3 million. Those applications are currently going through the eligibility and scoring process with a total amount awarded to be awarded or set aside in the spending plan of about 1.5 for both of those programs combined. So excited to get that one launched and get funding out to those folks here very shortly as well. So if there are any questions, or if there aren't any questions, I guess I should say, I'm going to turn it over to Joseph, and he's going to give us a little information about some final rule updates.
I have a quick question.
Yep.
I don't know if the rules have changed at all in terms of using ARPA dollars for funding parks. I saw that Robinson Park was included in here somewhere.
Revenue loss.
Excuse me?
Revenue loss.
Expenditure category 6, revenue loss.
Okay. So, and Robinson Park is not in a low-income area, right? Nor is Naog Park, correct?
Correct.
So, we can utilize funding for a new pool up in Naog out of ARPA funds, correct?
Not any of the ARPA funds. It's got to be specifically to revenue loss dollars. So that revenue loss category, or the $10 million that the city's elected to take here for that allowance, that is the most flexible category.
So out of the 10 million, we can grab a couple million out of that.
In theory, right, there is in that spending plan that we saw last April as well, in that revenue loss category, there were the different projects that were already budgeted or allocated for, and a lot of those projects are on that infrastructure list in that slide that we showed you of which projects are currently in progress, right, what are in design, what are in procurement. So a lot of these projects they're running now, they're on their way moving forward. So to that end, theoretically, to the answer to your question is yes, revenue loss dollars can be used for any provision of government services. The city's revenue loss dollars at this point have been budgeted, allocated, and the majority of those projects are moving forward at this point.
So you're saying anything in category 6 is revenue loss. So you have Oakmont and Robinson, and then the Kaiser Valley Stormwater and Hazard Mitigation are also in there.
Yep.
Parking structure improvements,
Yes.
ambulance service studies.
Yes. Yep.
And then we have
We could pull that out, we don't need that.
provision of government services. It's a 2.3. Now, what is all entailed in that?
That's what was placed, that was the money that council and mayor used to support the budget. The city budget.
Okay. 1.5 to street cameras. Is that, do you guys?
I think it's 260,000.
Where's the ambulance?
So we do have a slide here dedicated to the revenue loss category. So if you'd like, we can go to the next slide and we can get to that and have a broader discussion. So first, we're going to talk about really some of the regulatory updates. So I will say that in our 20-plus years of managing federal grants and disaster recovery programs, Treasury has been more flexible and more responsive in this program than we've seen previously, really just due to the unprecedented nature of the impacts of the COVID-19 public health emergency. So when we look back at when the guidance first came out back in March of 2021, right? We had the interim final rule, and then counties and cities, tribal nations and territories submitted tens of thousands of comments, questions, feedback to the Treasury. Then the final rule was issued in January of 2022, and that was the final guidance to all of the entities in terms of how to spend the funding. Well, there was still feedback, right? There was still some concerns from local officials, from lobbying groups, particularly as we see on this slide. We have a link from the National League of Cities, one of the strongest organizations that lobbies on behalf of cities at the congressional level, and the National Association of Counties and a few others, to really address some of the issues that many local governments were having with getting their funding spent, identifying projects. A lot of it was for the smaller communities that their biggest need was with more traditional infrastructure like transportation projects and more general infrastructure. So in January of 2023, there was some information passed down that said, hey, be on the lookout for ARPA Flex, right? We're going to expand these eligibilities even further to a few specific areas, one of those being transportation projects, which is that more traditional infrastructure of roadways, bridges, and in addition to that, being able to utilize it for some CDBG eligible projects, so the community development block grant projects, as well as other traditional disaster recovery, which in many areas of the country, there's still a need for that. Many communities, like in Florida, are still recovering from the effects of the disasters, the major hurricanes last year. So, but one of the things that we've learned in our experience is that the flexibility and the responsiveness is great. However, it does require a little bit more patience because there were many communities that, when the interim final rule came out, spent a lot of their money, right? And when the final rule came out and those eligibilities were expanded, they're kicking themselves because they missed out on opportunities to wait for that, after not waiting for that final guidance. They missed out on opportunities to really have a bigger impact because they didn't know really the totality of what they could spend it on. So as of now, the official guidance hasn't even been issued by Treasury. So we don't have a firm idea of what the reporting requirements are, what the other additional statutory or regulatory requirements would be for this expenditure category. But it is something that we're monitoring on a daily basis. And once that guidance is issued, if from a strategic standpoint, it makes sense to pivot any of the projects, obviously it's something that the city will look at, and from an advisory standpoint, from a compliance standpoint, make sure that everything is fully compliant with all of the guidance that is issued.
So with that being said, I mean, we put together a spending plan that allocated all of this money, right? Did we wait until final guidance before we put a plan together that allocated all this money?
The city waited until the final rule was issued to create a spending plan, yes. So this, Treasury said, we're going to issue the final rule, right? We're going to issue it. They didn't tell us when, but the city did wait to create a spending plan until that final guidance was issued. This news has become popular because, it is a lifeline for a lot of communities that don't have enough projects to fill up their budget, right? There's a lot of communities, those assistance programs, mortgage assistance, the business assistance, it doesn't make sense for them. So really that opening up to that transportation infrastructure, I think was the largest driver from what we've seen in the 40 other entities that we're working with around the country. So, but to answer your question, yes, the city did wait till the final guidance was issued.
So you're saying of January 22, that final rule?
Yes, sir.
And then now the one of January 2023 has some flexibility. Hence the word flex.
Yeah, so
Well, how much flexibility?
if I can jump in.
How much flexibility are we talking about?
Yeah, so the ARPA Flex, right, it wasn't on the radar until I would say the end of last year, around Christmas time is when I think it started to jump on everybody's radar. Converse to that, everybody knew the final rule was going to be issued sometime early 2022. So the city strategically didn't finalize their spending plan until April of that year to make sure that final rule was digested, did a final review of all the projects, and making sure everything's good. So at that point, what always comes with these programs is there's going to be some kind of addendum that get issued, and then you just have to kind of react to those. This is one of those addendum that are being issued now, and once it does get issued, the big takeaway here is we'll digest it with the city, we'll review it against your project list, and we'll be able to advise you guys on any kind of potential changes or updates you might be able to take advantage of.
Yeah, the final rule was a planned issuance of final regulatory guidance. ARPA Flex is really a response to, again, some of the smaller counties and cities, more rural areas where that is their greatest need, and that eligibility was not there in the final rule.
Councilman, let me add to that. I think the January 2023 piece that you're speaking about, that essentially comes from the blog post from the National League of Cities that said, this is where we think spending is going to go out.
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
Sorry.
My drama teachers would be ashamed. I think the January 2023 date that you're speaking about and the National League of Cities piece that we're talking about here, that essentially amounts to a blog post from the National League of Cities that hypothesizes where spending may be eligible. We do not have final rule on ARPA Flex yet. We've been waiting. We thought it was going to be issued the end of February, but we do not have final ARPA Flex rules as it stands today.
And as Joseph pointed out, the transportation portion of Flex would actually be really positive for us in the city, because what it would mean is right now our transportation, any of the streetscape projects we have need to be in the qualified census tract. If the rule is as the National League of Cities thinks it may be, that will allow us to be citywide with streetscape projects and any sort of transportation infrastructure, like stormwater, so we could do stormwater wherever. That would be the same thought process in there.
Would that include paving?
Pardon?
Would that include paving?
Yes.
I think so.
So I'm seeing a spending plan that has a total of $68,746,050, right?
Yep.
That is our total ARPA package, correct?
Correct.
So the spending plan we have in front of us does allocate all of this money out. So are we holding off on anything? Are we waiting on anything? It seems to be the plan that's moving forward, although we're saying there's flexibility here.
That's a good question. It's a tough question because there's been no talk about them changing when we have to have the money obligated by. So it's an odd dynamic. They want to change the rules and really would make it very hard to do a transportation plan if they change the rules this late in the game, unless you have it sort of started, right? Because you have all the engineering, design, all of that to do. We're fortunate that we have quite a few of them because we have all that grant funding in the mix as well. All of the money when the budget was passed last April, May, is allocated, right, to a project somewhere along this line. And many of these projects, the money is obligated at this point. It might be under contract. The NOFAs have gone out. Some of them are in design because they're grant matches. So it's all in various states of how it's moving. But what we're doing is we're still trying to keep on track that this money needs to be obligated or spent by the end of '24, because we certainly don't want any of it to
So
go back.
it needs to be earmarked by '24, right?
Obligated under contract.
Under contract by '24.
Which is a pretty high hurdle, because if we want to get it under a construction contract, we have to get through the whole engineering process. And most of the streets that are involved in any of our projects have at least one block of PennDOT road in it, which means we need PennDOT permits. And those are usually a 3 to 5 month lag, so it's rather time consuming.
Have you identified any projects that we could pivot on? I mean, you use the term pivot. Do we know what items are possible pivots?
Well, there's a couple of streetscapes. So we have a streetscape that's in there for North Scranton. I think it's North Main Street. That is not in the QCT. That could be a pivot to that project. So there are a couple others of the streetscapes that this would actually really help us in that regard.
And that piece of, that Providence Corners there, that doesn't fall under a qualified census tract?
No, it seems like it should, but it doesn't.
It actually divides it, Council.
It's divided?
I believe it goes right up Market Street, if I'm not mistaken.
Desi, let me go back to the 10 million maximum allowance for lost revenue. So you said earlier, or maybe I heard it wrong, but you said earlier that to avoid census tract areas, money could have been pulled from there, correct? Or projects could have been identified from the 10 million lost revenue pot of money.
Let me just kind of rephrase and make sure I'm understanding you correctly. Yes, so the revenue loss pot of money is the most flexible, and it could be used to fund projects outside
Of the census.
Of a census.
So
Yeah.
before January 2022, we could have identified out of that $10 million pot a substantial amount for the pool at NAOG. We could have. Is that reasonable to say or assume?
Yeah, I would. Yeah, I couldn't disagree with that. Yeah,
So we didn't.
correct.
That's sad. Okay, thank you.
So to give a general overview of revenue loss as a category and the city status. So the revenue loss category, as we've kind of discussed several times, is the most flexible of the categories. Really, the eligibility means that the project has to meet the definition of a provision of government services. So initially, when the initial guidance was released, there was a very complicated calculation that entities had to perform to calculate their lost revenue, then calculate counterfactual revenue based on what your growth trends were. And it was inconsistent from community to community, and really would have been impossible for them to audit. So they allowed entities to select a $10 million standard allowance instead, and that was the city's selection, was to select that $10 million standard allowance. Think of it as a standard deduction on your taxes versus an itemized deduction on your taxes. So choosing that standard allowance not only increased the amount of revenue loss funding that the city would be able to take out of their ARPA funding, but again, really eased the administrative burden on that category. So the city identified $9.98 million worth of projects against that $10 million. Those have been allocated to those projects, with about half of it truly obligated at this point. So while it is the most flexible in terms of project eligibility, the federal requirements for projects being spent using federal funding, most of those do still apply to the projects that are spent with this funding. So it does still require that level of oversight, compliance, and monitoring, on all of the funds that are expended through this category. One of the updates that came in the final rule was that the dollars can be used as the local match portion of allowable federal, state, or local sources. And the word allowable meaning if that grant program says that it's allowed. There are some grant programs that explicitly say you cannot use any other source other than your general revenue or your city's funding as your local match requirement. And there's several of those, many of those programs out there that have that restriction to them. But if there is no such restriction on that federal or state grant program, it can be used as a local match, as the entity's local match requirement.
If I can also add one thing, Councilman McAndrew, to your question about the identification of that NAOG pool project early on, just as a reminder to the allocation plan and the development of that plan, it did go through a community survey where community members actually voted through what was called the budget challenge on what they felt like were the most important needs within the community. So that allocation plan, as it currently exists and what was presented, last year, was really a reflection, I think, of what community felt like were the most important needs and where they would like to see the funding go. So I didn't want to pass by that question too quickly without just kind of refreshing and recalling the process to get to that allocation plan. Anything else from anyone? Okay.
So we also wanted to touch briefly on the dashboard that the city is utilizing. The dashboard does a couple of things. It provides for a transparent and open process in terms of what is being spent. Actually, I don't even know if this is the most recent one. It might have gotten updated since.
It has been updated since.
Yep. So it has even been updated since this presentation was made. This document lives live on the city's website. You see the link is right there. It's available on the city's website. But it breaks it down and kind of displays the data in a couple of different ways. You can see it displayed by the different pillars. It's economic recovery, infrastructure, revenue loss, administration, and public health. So seeing what was budgeted, what has been obligated, and what's been expended. So so it not only provides a transparency, but again to help keep the community informed on the overall progress to date, looking at the individual projects, giving a 10,000-foot overview, and being able to track as a timeline as well.
Questions?
Well, I'm going to come back to the Providence Streetscape project. This was something that we put on our list of streetscapes to do. Did we recently find out it wasn't in the census tract, or we?
So the idea was, we were talking about doing North Main Street leading up to there, which is in, right? But there's been a lot more conversation that it would probably be better served if we were further up the street in the square, right? So, we thought our original intent was to be further down the street, which was in the QCT.
Okay, so we're gonna have to get to the map. So which streets or which blocks are you talking about here? So I'm right in Providence Square. I'm on Main Avenue, Market Street.
Oh, sorry.
Market in Maine?
Right, so we would be further south of there.
South is going towards Schiff's and Dixon City. Which way is south? South is coming towards
Greenridge.
Scranton High School, junior high.
Okay, coming towards Greenridge. So what falls under the census tract? What area there falls under the census
We'd have
tract?
to, I don't know if you have the map with you. It's easier to look on the,
I mean, what I'm seeing is I'm thinking we have a West Scranton streetscape, in which West Scranton gets us somewhat to our borders at Taylor. And we have a North Scranton street, and I know it's not going to be that whole segment, but they're the two pieces of Main Avenue, West Scranton and North Scranton, which
right,
would
and so
encompass the whole
if
of Main
Chris could
Avenue.
we could show you the map as we're,
Actually, Desi, do you have?
oh, yeah, we could pull it up. Right, because I don't believe we could connect Main Street and stay in the QCT right now, today, right? Because it's in and out of the QCT. But if we can change the rules, if the rules change and we can move it wherever we need it, then we can.
So this is one of these pieces that could fall if the rules change as the National League of Cities is saying they may.
Right.
We're going to be able to get the whole Providence piece
Right, we can
incorporated into this.
relook at where we are, yes.
Okay.
Here's what it is, okay.
It's going to be for startup expansion.
Okay.
Do you want to drive, Eileen?
Yeah, you want to drive?
We're going to have Eileen drive us.
It's not.
What was that?
We're going to have Eileen drive us there.
Thing.
You should be able to zoom
Oh,
in.
here.
It's plus and minus.
It's doing here. Is that where I want to go?
Can we go this way?
You can click and drag.
We're getting there. I didn't see, do you see Providence now? There's, here we are. Okay, we're getting warmer.
Here's North Main.
Market Street.
Main.
That's the split.
There we go, this way. Can you see where, you probably can't see. See how it's red and then green?
So that's Market Street coming right on the border of the yellow and the red.
Yeah.
That's Market Street coming down?
Correct.
So initially, you were thinking...
Initially, we could have been in the red. Right. We could, right now, today, we could do a project where the area is red. But since it divides the street, it might make more sense if we have more flexibility to rethink the whole idea, right?
Okay, so right now, currently as it stands, where would you would go from Providence Corners coming south towards Greenridge Street?
We have to stay in the red
Yeah,
area.
all of that,
Yeah,
it seems
but
to me,
we would
I
come
can't
right
really
down.
see the whole map, but to me, it seems like it encompasses that side of North Scranton from Market Street south.
Yeah. And Councilman, there's a decent portion in West Scranton as well, but Desi, I don't know if you want to come down North Main a little bit. As a lot of businesses have asked about grant funding as well, the qualified census tract sort of dances across Main Avenue in certain parts of West Side specifically. So I think if ARPA Flex were to give us that, no pun intended, flexibility to pursue traffic infrastructure projects, I think it alleviates some of the problems we would have had, at least in awarding grants along that track of West Scranton.
Now, do the facade, the pieces that we're going to do to improve facades,
Yes.
is that, are we gonna-
Yeah, we've been fortunate with the facades in West Side because NeighborWorks actually has a grant from DCED that is not based on the same rules as ARPA. So if somebody comes in for a grant and they can't do ARPA, we just, refer them to their program. So that's worked out pretty good.
Okay.
So Councilman, if you'll note, this here is Euclid Avenue. I don't know if you can see my mouse well on the presentation.
Yep.
But this is Main Avenue as it passes under that
And do the
train track.
train rack.
Yeah.
That is often problematic for
Red,
tractor trailers.
Main Avenue is in the red?
Part of Main Avenue. So this is approximately the area of the Trip House
Yep.
up towards Foster Street. As you get up towards the Trip Park section, Trip Park comes out along Main Avenue. And then as you get closer towards Sweatland and along Pettibone Street, part of Main Avenue comes in. But as I mentioned, it does split Main Avenue in half at several instances.
Okay,
This is another perfect example.
Move back up to your
Certainly.
upper right. So where it splits there, the red and the yellow, what's the street that's running along?
So this is Pettibone Street.
Pettibone, okay. So from Pettibone to where does...
That's Main Street where it's split.
Yeah, so
Yeah,
it's
Pettibone and
along Main, Pettibone down to Price at Allen Park. And then again, it continues split all the way down to Fella Street, just past Luzerne Street.
Okay. Can you go back?
Certainly.
Back the other way? And what's the section that's in the yellow of Main Avenue? Goes from Pettibone to what?
From Pettibone up to Euclid.
Okay.
So as Euclid,
Yep.
actually goes across that line, Euclid is sort of a barrier in itself.
So at this point, that Providence piece that you're talking about, is this something you're thinking about moving forward with, or right now you're thinking about putting it on hold?
Well, I'd rather see what happens, right, because I think it would be a better project. But, and we had expected, well, the National League of Cities expected the rules to be updated at the end of February. But here we are.
The one question I had from a few weeks ago was, I was told when it comes to, so we have our qualified census tracts, but I was told with unemployment rates, and maybe you guys know the best from ANSER, if our city unemployment rates were above state or national unemployment rates, we might not be confined to the qualified census tracts. We may be able to use the money citywide. Is this something you've come across or heard?
Yeah, okay.
So, Treasury has specific guidelines that they lay out, for what they call, impacted populations and disproportionately impacted populations, with very specific enumerated projects for each one of those classifications. And those are based on income guidelines or qualification for certain federal programs, like, for instance, if someone qualifies for food stamps, right, they're automatically impacted, right? If they live in a qualified census tract, they're automatically disproportionately impacted, and they give us the income guidelines. Outside of that, Treasury does say that there is potentially flexibility to identify specific impacts based on your community, right? And let's say we want to use unemployment as an example there. So they say that you can identify the impact, but you must identify a response that is proportional to that impact. So if we were going to identify a response to unemployment rates, when going under analysis from an auditor or under Inspector General, right, from Treasury, something like a parks project might not be addressing the impact of unemployment rates, right? What they're looking for is things that address those specific impacts. So, the jobs programs, right? The wage programs, individual assistance programs. So there is some allowability to get creative, which actually we attempted to do with some of the income data, but really where we've been laying on these programs is trying to stick with Treasury's explicit guidance, really from a risk mitigation standpoint.
Is there anything from the original spending plan that sticks out, like at the point in time when it was created, we were in a different, mind state. Is there anything that sticks out right off the bat as something that could be reallocated somewhere else?
Not off the top of my head, no. I don't know. I guess I wish that to you guys as well. I think, looking back, and maybe that question is, as FAQs have been issued, right, from Treasury, more information as the program continues to run. Is there anything that sticks out as would we have done it differently, or is there something else to consider? There's nothing on that list that really jumps out at this point. Besides, I think all the good things that the grant programs are continuing to do for the small businesses and the nonprofits is just a cool thing to see. But I don't know anything.
The only part of spending that I could see is we have $3 million for sidewalks. So while $3 million is a lot of money, it's not a lot of money in perspective of sidewalks. So some of that money will be accounted for in the, I don't know if you're familiar with the grant we got before for the McGreevy property. There is a little area of sidewalks there where there's a culvert-type bridge, and we'll need some of the dollars into that area. But, after that, we do have CDBG dollars that we're using for some sidewalk projects in the city. So a decision will have to be made whether or not there's areas where we specifically need sidewalks, or is that money better served in another direction.
If I might add too, I think as we've received grant applications, we've tried to respond to the needs of the community. So for example, the community wellness grants, we had a particular amount of money set aside for drug overdose prevention programs. The need that the community expressed in their grant applications was not as great, so we were able to reallocate under the umbrella of community wellness grants to be able to fund more projects up to the 23 of 25 that Mr. King alluded to earlier. In response to the housing and the home rehab, we felt that the housing market would not necessarily support more money towards first-time home buyers, so we thought it would be a better use of funding to allow folks to have funds to repair their homes and stay in their homes and continue to be homeowners in the city of Scranton. So we have made gentle adjustments, and you've been informed of those through budget memos, but those are really the allocations that we've made to date.
And I will just clarify too, when you say changes, we look through the compliance eligibility lens. So as we look through that lens, right, there's nothing that jumps out to us that we would have done differently. I think the lens that Chris and Erica and Eileen state of need and understanding the community, I mean, that's the city's, business in their role, so.
NEPA Thrives, I see $500,000 dedicated to that. Do you have any info or overview of?
Yeah, actually, it has. They put out an RFP for a part of their project, and I know they got the responses back. I don't know if they issued the contract or not yet, so, but that is moving along.
And what is encompassed in that project that they're doing?
So Scranton Area Foundation is doing that project. So there's two pieces to it. The first piece is a workforce resource assessment, which I cannot understate how much that's needed. There's so many workforce programs throughout the entire region. They're often not coordinated or connected. So people have an awful hard time trying to find the proper resources and the proper supports to get themselves trained in the area. So that's part of it. And the second part of it is, and I believe we had talked about this before, but it's to, Scranton Area Foundation will bring in a series of navigators, there is what they're referring to them all, and these would be individuals that would help people that go into these training programs navigate all of the workforce resources. Say, if you're in need of childcare, or you need, boots to go on a construction part, to find the proper funding and proper resources to do all that. So that the idea would be, if you enter into a training, you can navigate it successfully, come out the other side, and be gainfully employed. The caveat with that would be that the people in the program need to be from qualified census tracts in the city of Scranton.
Well, we appreciate all of you coming here this evening, give us an update as to where we're at, and thank you very much. We'll hopefully have you come in again, probably in a few months or whatever, 3-4 months, and keep us updated. And thank you once again for coming in this evening.
Thank you for having us.
Thank you.
Thank you.
We'll take a 2-minute break before we start the meeting.